Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Eardley. I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. The Resilient Retail Club is my membership group for creative product businesses. You can find out more about it at resilientretailclub.com. So this is the 1 year anniversary of the podcast launching. I can't believe it. We're 1 year in. It's unbelievable. And I've got a fantastic episode for the anniversary edition. I'm being joined today by Komal Pandya-Rao. She is a former client of mine. We worked together for about 6 months. She's also a member of the Resilient Retail Club. She runs a fabulous stationery brand called The Design Palette. And she's going to be talking to us today all about pitching to the press. This is obviously part of my series of interviews with experts and small businesses talking about the one thing that can move your business forward. And when I ran my survey, which you can still grab a copy of at resilientretailclub.com/survey, the number one thing that helped people move their business forward was organic PR coverage. So either an influencer, a publication, or another big account, for example, sharing their brand really helped move people forward and grow their sales. So I'm excited for you to hear what Komal has to say about how she pitches her products and gets them into places like Stylist, for example, as well as many others. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Do you want to kick us off with just telling us a little bit about you and your business and how you got started?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Komal and I design stationery. So I have a stationery brand called The Design Palette. It's basically very bright colours, bold patterns, that type of thing. I sell notebooks, planners and greeting cards. And yeah, I started the business about 2 years ago.
They are very bright and beautiful. And in fact, I'm looking at one of your planners right now. And what was it that drew you to design-led stationery?
So my background, I'm actually completely self-taught. So my background's actually in HR analytics. So I've been in the corporate world for about just over 10 years, mainly in the sort of data science space. So completely polar opposite of this. But when I was working in the corporate field, I found that actually a lot of the stationery was quite pared back and it was quite minimalist. Bright colours wasn't really a thing. And despite obviously everyone needs notebooks when they're in the office, I just didn't find anything that was quite playful. So I felt like there was a market there. Generally, people buy colourful notebooks for more of a hobby piece, like outside of work. But I wanted to kind of bring that into the workspace as well.
So it's high quality stationery that's appropriate for work, but it's also beautiful and bright.
Yes, yeah. So work for work and non-work. But yeah, that's exactly it.
And so just to go back to that then, you design all of the stationery yourself and you're self-taught.
Yeah. So I love learning new things, and most of the things I learn are quite random. They don't normally sort of relate to my field of work or anything. But I started doing an Adobe Illustrator course, and I had no idea the amount of work or the whole process around designing anything really. I've not really been very arty at school or anything. And I just got completely drawn in, and I started doing it in my train journeys, and I just got completely obsessed with it. And yeah, sort of learnt the Adobe suite, and then I just sort of went from there. I sort of did it in about a year, I think, year and a half. And then I realized actually there's a whole market of jobs available in this area. And I just thought, I've always thought whether there was something else that's better suited for me. And although I love data and I'm such a geek when it comes to stuff like that, but I always was missing like the creative angle. I just felt like this was the perfect sort of fit. Having a business, being able to do the analytics around that, but also then being able to sort of do more of the creative work as well.
Yeah, I love that idea of sitting there on the train with your Adobe Illustrator out working on it. But it's so interesting because so many people I speak to who started creative product businesses, it's exactly that. It's that doing a job that you enjoyed, but then there's that creative element missing, and then it's allowed you to really indulge it. So it just is incredible though. As you said, you're self-taught and now you're creating. How many designs do you think you create in a year?
Oh God only knows. I've had about 40 designs that have gone onto things like notebooks, and probably over 100 on greeting cards. But I create so much more than that just haven't got round to sort of printing them all out yet.
Well, at least you're never stuck for new ideas.
No, that's it. Yeah, it's such a big, so much opportunity in the space that it can be overwhelming because you just don't know, what you should be focusing on first. But it's really exciting, and I think that's what's so great about this versus sort of a corporate job where, you are kind of pigeonholed. Whereas I think with this, it's as fast as you want to kind of grow your business, really. Yeah.
So today specifically, the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is because you have had quite a large amount of press coverage. So do you want to just run us through where you've been featured?
Yeah, so I've had my products featured in the Stylist, 91 magazine, Delicious magazine, Papercraft, Crafts Beautiful. They're like the most recent ones.
Which is quite incredible. That's quite a rundown for just your most recent ones. And what I love about it is sometimes you'd be like, oh yeah, I was in Stylist, or sometimes it seems like it sort of popped up out of nowhere. But I know that that's not the case at all. And I know that you've worked really hard on your press outreach. So what would you suggest in terms of how to even get started? If someone's listening to the podcast and they're thinking, I should be doing more press. Or how did you even start, or what was your starting point?
My first piece of press actually just happened very naturally. I didn't even realise I was pitching. So I just saw a request for like a product feature on Instagram for both Crafts Beautiful and Papercraft. And I just thought, I'll just send them an email and just send my pictures through and my product pictures through and see what happens. And at that time, I had no idea that's what I was doing. I was basically pitching. So that it felt good because actually, if I'd known I was pitching, I'd probably be a bit more freaked out by it. But because it happened so naturally, I just didn't even think about it. I got a sort of email through within like a couple of hours, I think it was. And both of those features happened 2 weeks apart. So that was great. And it was really exciting. I remember sort of running to like the supermarket to kind of get the magazines and get them printed and stuff, have a little look. But yeah, that was kind of natural. I guess in terms of I think there's two kind of ways you can do this. It's like systematic, or you can do it more sort of organically. There's lots of things like on Twitter and Instagram where people are looking for product features and things. So, you can submit that way as well. And that tends to be, it moves very fast. So generally when they're looking for something, you need to respond very quickly. Even if they've got a deadline of a week away, don't wait a week. Try and get it done as soon as possible because it is normally first come, first serve type thing.
Yeah.
But then I started that way. But then what I did, I think within 6 months of starting my business was I joined PR Dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt that although, one, it was an area that I had no idea about. I mean, I just felt like I was kind of going a bit blind. And when you're doing a business where you have no, I didn't come from like an arts or creative background. I felt like I had enough new things to look at and think about without adding press to it as well. So I joined PR Dispatch, and Rosie and her team are like really supportive. It's a great platform to kind of pick up the theory, just sort of troubleshoot some of the things where you might find that you get some sort of questions from press that you don't really know how to answer. So it's great for those type of things. And then what I did was I've basically been systematically building press into my sort of day-to-day sort of routine. So that's kind of how I've been managing it.
So let's just talk about PR Dispatch just a second for people who aren't familiar with it. So PR Dispatch, I'll put a note in the show notes. It is a membership-based PR platform for product businesses run by, as you said, Rosie Davis-Smith and her team. And I think it's something that I often recommend to people, because one of the things with PR is, obviously, as you said, you were coming from a completely different background. So in terms of knowing exactly how to structure things, how to pitch, who to pitch to, getting contacts, and that's what you get from PR Dispatch. And it's also very, because another question that I get asked by people about PR is, should I have a PR agency? And I mean, I'm sure there are very effective PR agencies out there, but from my experience is that people get the most value out of PR, something like PR Dispatch and membership, where you get that information, those contacts, and then you do the pitching yourself, which is basically your exact experience.
Yeah. And I think, there's nothing there that I feel like once you know this information, you've got the framework, it's very doable you can do it yourself, like most things really, but it's not technical to the point that this support. What the great thing about this is, once you've done the course, you obviously know like what the process is and how press work and the timelines that they're working to.
Yeah.
The people you need to contact, those things are really useful. But also what's great is they have a Facebook group. So if you get some odd query, which you do the odd thing where you're like, okay, I've sort of pitched and I haven't heard anything, I've done it like 5 times, what do I do? And you just don't know what the kind of acceptable sort of time frame is to chase, or if they ask you for a sample, is that normal, is it not normal, that type of thing. It's good for those type of situations as well. And regularly the team will sort of, if there's like something they've seen on Twitter or any sort of urgent press requests, they send those through as well. So it means that if you don't want to do the organic and also like this sort of way, you can just do one thing and they sort of feed everything to you, which is quite useful.
Yes. So it's what I guess you'd call the react. So you could do the reactive. So if a request comes through, rather than proactive, which is what we're going to talk about, which is, as you said, you put that into your daily routine or your weekly routine. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about then how you actually fit it in?
Basically what I do, you have a calendar for the year that will basically show you when the long-term leads are and short-term. So essentially some press run like every 4 weeks, some will run daily, and then others run like on a more kind of seasonal, quarterly type time frame. So you have, and depending on like which magazines you want to go for, you'll have like a clear view of that. So I have that on like a spreadsheet, for example. And what I do is then I kind of work to their timelines. So if I know that I want to be in the Stylist, which runs every couple of weeks or every week if it's online, then I'll pitch well before that, so I can kind of get in time. Because the thing is, if you sort of miss it, they might bookmark your feature and your pitch, or they might sort of plan you out for future sort of publication, but the chances are it'll get drowned in the inbox with everything else that's coming up that's more recent. Mm-hmm. So timeline is quite important there. And then what I do also is, if I've got new product releases coming out, I kind of plan that accordingly as well. So if I know that I've got something coming out in January, I won't be pitching in January, obviously. I'll pitch like a couple of months beforehand for a long lead.
Right.
They do run well in advance. So sometimes, you'd have to pitch in January for something that's going out in September or June or July or something. So it's like really like you've got to really think ahead. So if you're planning out your product launches, it's just part of that process. The other thing I'd say is obviously part of that product launch process is that they do require cutouts. So when you're pitching, so essentially cutouts are essentially either on a white background, your product on a white background, or it's cut out entirely. So any kind of, it can fit on any type of background, basically. Mm-hmm. When you're pitching, the two things you should always have ready is line sheets and product cutouts. So I generally, as soon as I have a new product, anyone could create a line sheet. Do it now, I'd say. Do it as soon as possible, because that is something that even if you do it organically and you're responding to press on Twitter or wherever else, you'll always need a line sheet and you'll always need product cutouts, because without those two things, they won't even look at your pitch. So what I do is I generally have a template ready, and then I sort of substitute products as and when. So I don't try and go over more than 2 pages.
Right.
Just because it gets turned into a catalogue, basically, which is what you want to try and avoid. 2 pages, and I tend to just put my bestsellers on there. And on the line sheet, you need to have the product name and your price point as well. And then obviously details about your brand, so your website, how they can contact you, etc. And then it needs to be really clear and easy to sort of, they'll probably open it up and probably spend about a couple of seconds on it. So it's not even going to be a long thing sort of thing. And then what you want to do is every time you have a new product coming, you just need to make sure you update that as and when you've got your product launch. So you're ready for pitching whenever that might happen.
Right.
So what I would say is fitting it around sort of their timescales and then also your product launches is like critical. The other thing that I do is when I do press pitches, I tend to take out predominantly quite like pretty much the whole day when I'm pitching.
Right.
And the reason being is what I find is if I pitch, say, in the morning, I'll get a couple of responses through in the afternoon. I don't like to leave it. I try to respond straight away because I feel like I've got more of a chance then of like, because obviously they've shown interest. You don't know what their diary is going to look like the next day. And what you don't want to do is get missed out on the opportunity. So I find that if I have everything on the ready, so when they come back to me and they say, right, okay, if you pitch a product, sometimes they like the product you pitch. Other times they'll be like, actually, we've got a whole feature on yellow products, this coming publication, and what you've pitched is blue, but actually you've got a yellow product in your line sheet. So therefore, actually, can you give me a cutout for that? So it'd be something like that would be a good example of the type of thing you would get. So then you just need to be on the ready to have a cutout for that yellow, whatever it will be.
Sometimes people say to me, well, I pitched, to a couple of, or I've pitched a couple of magazines and didn't hear anything back. But when you sit down and pitch, you pitch big volume, right?
Yeah. So I pitch over 100 publications at any one go.
Yeah.
So what I tend to have is I have a template, what I'm pitching for that specific thing. So say, for example, I've got some limited edition notebooks coming out.
Yeah.
If it's a publication that I haven't reached out to before, I'll introduce the brand.
Yeah. And
that's normally 2 or 3 lines. They don't need an essay. Literally, it's just very short and sweet. So if they wanted to, they could copy and paste it or, sort of summarize that. And then I'll talk a bit about the product. And then I'll put a picture of the product in. Some people like to put the cutout directly, embed it into the email. I generally do lifestyle images because I find that they just look so much nicer and more appealing, just to kind of get people's interest. And then at the end, I sort of say, well, this is where I can see it happening. So like I can see this featured in this part of the publication. So if they've got, a shopping page or something like that, and then how they can contact me. If this doesn't fit, then there are, attaches my line sheet and there's other products that you can have a look at here, and I can send you the cutout for them. So that's kind of what I do. And then I just make sure that I, even though it's just a template, I just try and make sure it's as personalized as possible. So if it's a publication that I follow, I read, I will sort of tailor the email to kind of make it a bit more personal. For example, Stylist is, I've been reading that for years, and it's one of I feel like that's where my sort of ideal customer would reading that. And also I love it as well. I love the content. So for me, that was one of my biggest features. I was so nervous before I pitched them. I think I spent 2 hours rereading my email. Like it took me ages. And then I got a response within 5 minutes. And I was like, I do not know why I was, overthinking it. But that's another thing, like try not to overthink it. Although it's intimidating, which, I completely get that. It kind of feels a bit like you're interviewing for a job or something, but do you need to get your products out there? It does make a massive difference. So yeah, I'd definitely say it's worth doing.
And I think as well, do you find that the fact that you're pitching so many almost takes the sting out a bit? I think sometimes people get this thing where they pitch a couple and they really in their head kind of build it up and then they pitch to them. But sometimes it is not exactly a numbers game because, you are tailoring each pitch, but it is a kind of almost a question of, right, you've just got to get it out there. And almost if you've pitched 100 people and you get, 3, 4, 5 back from that, then it kind of takes the sting a little bit about if you just put all your eggs into one basket and written one pitch to one place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, there's probably out of the 100, there's probably 5 that I know are an absolute fit, like absolutely, like if I got my products in them, that would be amazing. And then the rest are like, great. So the other thing is you've just got to make sure that the fit is right as well, because you'll get a lot more like sort of people ignoring your sort of pitch if actually your brand doesn't fit with a publication or your products don't fit with a publication. So it's definitely worth doing the research to see, can you see your product in that magazine? What kind of stuff do they publish otherwise? It's your ideal customer the same as like their ideal customer, because you're going to get a much quicker response if they can see that straight away that actually, it's a perfect fit. But I do think, the more you pitch one, it becomes like just part of the process, which is what I've tried to do, because it does, it is a nerve-wracking thing. So actually, if you just make it as one of the other things you've got to do during the day, it doesn't feel so nerve-wracking. The other thing is, it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to go out to big publications as well. I also pitched like independent sort of magazines as well, because I think, my ideal customer would read those things. So I think the more you kind of broaden your horizons, so if you find that actually the big publications aren't getting back to you, it's not personal, it's also timing. So if you get the timing wrong, they've just gone out and, sort of worked out what's going to be in the most recent publication. They may just ignore your pitch for that reason, but they love your products. A lot of times they don't even come back and give you that feedback. So you have no way of knowing if it's that or it's genuinely not a good fit. So you've just got to keep trying as well. So don't just pitch once and leave it. I chase up at least twice after the first pitch.
Oh, okay. So is it just kind of like a, hey, any questions, let me know type situation when yeah.
So the first time I chase, it's normally like 2 or 3 days after the first initial pitch, because you want to keep it fresh in their minds. And I normally just sort of reply over my email and just say, just want to follow up and check if anything is, any of my products fit, and if I can send you any cutouts, do let me know. And then the third time I do a sort of similar thing, but maybe like give it a week. The main thing is timing. So don't pitch on a Friday, because you just won't get any responses basically. And I would try and avoid the Monday. Like anyone, Monday is sort of the day when people are sort of working out what they've got to do for the week, and Friday people are sort of getting ready for the weekend. So try and do it between Tuesday and Thursday, and don't. I tend to pitch in the mornings, just get it done in the morning, and then I have the whole day for things to filter through.
And I suppose as well, you've built up over time a list of 100, but it's all based on your research and working out where it would fit and getting the contacts and everything else. So it's if anyone's listening thinking, oh my God, I can't think of 100 places to pitch. There's so many good principles here about things like doing that research, building up that list, getting yourself into that point where you can just pitch every time you've got something new to share, or every time it's coming up to the lead times for new publications, or for example, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. I think what's really interesting as well is that the way that you've sort of formalized and systemized this. So you've put in the time to do the organization and to set it up and to set up your calendar and to set up your lists. And then almost it's like becomes a process, and you can just, obviously it is time consuming, but it sounds like over time it's got quicker.
Yeah, and I think the thing about the 100 publications, I mean, I started with one, but like what I would say is one of the things I do is, for example, if I see someone's asking, like a journalist is asking for pictures, it may not be right for me at that point, or what they're asking for may not fit. But if I know that they've stopped, if they featured stationery in the past, I put them on my Excel spreadsheet, because actually that means that eventually I can probably pitch to them at some point, but they're not looking for that right now. That's the other thing, is if they're asking for pictures for, I don't know, mugs, I'm not going to go and pitch my notebook, because they'll just ignore it and they'll get annoyed as well. So the other thing is just to note that actually, if they have done notebooks in the past, that's something that that's an opportunity for later. So I think you can build it up that way as well. Build it up slowly. Don't feel the pressure. The other thing I'd say is I'm not very great at like sort of all the social media stuff, and because of my business, I've had to start building up Instagram. And I find actually a lot of the journalists approach me through my Instagram feed. That's how they find me. So I'm now at kind of the point where I have people who sort of reach out to me to say, can I have your cutout for this product? Because we would like to feature it. So I've had that for Closer magazine, for example.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really random, but they found one of my posts, I can't remember, over Christmas, and they wanted to feature me. So I think the other thing is just also, you just never know who's looking at your social media accounts and stuff. So, good professional photography there really helps.
And also, do you find that you started to build up relationships with certain journalists?
Yeah. So I think a lot of them, I mean, they're really super busy. So, it's really hard to kind of have any kind of real chit chat or anything like that. But yeah, there are some that I've managed to kind of, because I pitch so often to them, it's got a lot more easier. And I think, so I go out to some of them, for example, the Stylist, I may reach out to there and just sort of say, well, what's coming up? Is there anything I can pitch for? And that's good once you kind of get that rapport going, and they know your business and they know the kind of stuff that you're doing. The other kind of proactive way to do it is sort of say, okay, what's coming up in the next 4 months that potentially I could pitch for, so I can be ready. So if they've got a massive thing on, I don't know, work-life balance, and you do journals for that type of thing, then you're a perfect fit for it. One of the things it's a mindset change, but one of the things that I've kind of realized, and it's taken me a long time to realize it, even though read the theory about it, but it's the fact that ultimately this is like a two-way process. They need to fill their product pages, and ultimately you can fit that need. But it's very hard when you're kind of thinking about the fact that you're putting yourself out there, and that's what it feels like to think like that. But that's exactly what it is. So I approach it from that angle now, where I'm sort of like, okay, what features have you got, and what sort of stuff are you doing in the future? If you've got like a red shopping page or a blue shopping page, can I put my notebook in there, and whatever else? And it is about the angle that you kind of, how you pitch. So if they, like I say, if they've got work-life balance piece, then, I can talk about my notebooks from that angle. If they've got a bit around spring, then I can talk about my spring colour notebooks and, that type of thing. So you also need to think about it from their point of view, because you want to make their life easier in terms of how they might be able to sell your product through that lens.
I think that's such a great point. You raised lots of really good points here. And it's really interesting because through my Forbes contributor role, I actually have begun to experience the other side of this, which is really hilarious, because I will get people pitch me stories. And it was a similar kind of light bulb for me, where I realized that actually when somebody pitches you a story and it's basically clearly a press release and it's like a fluff piece, and they're like, oh, we've launched this new technology, would you like to write about it? The answer is usually not particularly. But if somebody is just genuinely helpful, and there are, for example, people whose PR companies will say to me, this announcement's just happened, would you like an expert comment on it? Here's the expert comment, these persons available on if you want to talk to them on the phone, this sort of thing. And that's the sort of stuff I end up using much more, because then, and it's a similar thing with the product photography and products as well, because you said you're now thinking about it from their point of view. You're thinking, instead of you thinking about, well, I know ultimately the goal is getting your product out there, but instead of you sort of saying, right, how can you feature my product? You're almost saying, you've got to write an article about eco-friendly stationery, for example, or FSE, or made in the UK products, for example. And then it's actually incredibly helpful if they a very nice made in the UK brand, for example, sends you an email with some pictures, and you can just be like, oh, look at that, bingo, it's just done. And it's so much simpler. And also I go back to the people, or sometimes now like you say, sometimes I'll say, would so-and-so like to give me a quote for this article? Because I know they'll turn it around quickly. I know that it will be on point. I know that it's just simple. And equally, I've got people who will ask me for quotes on stories, because again, I've been helpful and turned it around quickly. And so I think that's such a good point that you raised there. We think about this pitching as very much like a push thing, but it can be really collaborative. And I read a stat as well that there's something like half as many journalists as there were 10 years ago, and they get paid half as much, or some crazy stat like that. But it was basically talking about how they've got so much content they have to create, so anything that you can do to help them, then it's huge.
Over time, I think, you build the confidence, it's part of a process, right? It's part of the learning process where you kind of, this all feels very new and overwhelming. And then it just becomes part of the kind of day-to-day thing. So an example, I'm taking part in a pop-up at the moment. So it's my first time I've done it. And the first thing that popped into my head was actually, is there a way that I can sort of do some PR around this, even though it's not essentially my pop-up, I'm participating in it with 39 other independent makers. And so I reached out to the person that sort of is leading on it and leading the pop-up. And I said, do you mind if I sort of do a couple of pictures and just see how it goes? And we might be able to get something out of it. And I did that on Friday, and I got a response today from a local newspaper who's willing to do a piece on it. So
brilliant.
Yeah, and I think the thing is also to pick up on the overall trends that are happening. So if there's lots on shopping independent and, buying small and stuff like that at the moment. And, if you fit that bill, then, you should be talking about it in your pitch, because that's what's you've got to think about all those USPs that you want to put in the email, basically, to kind of, tick as many boxes as you can so that you can get featured.
I think as well, what you said, going back to something you said earlier that was really interesting, was you talked about how, for example, Stylist is something that you're very familiar with. But I also know from personally that if you want to know how to pitch and what kind of things they're going to want, then read the magazines.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That is, so there's some magazines that I've never heard of, but actually looking at their content, I can see my products in there. So I think, you definitely need to have make sure what sort of features, where in the magazine you see your products fitting in, the kind of stuff they do, even the way they kind of talk to their audience, the style, is that style fitting with your brand? Because if it's very formal and you're a very friendly brand and you use, like, I don't know, a lot more slang, say, you just need to make sure the fit is right.
Yeah, and I just think as well, what you're sort of describing as well is that PR mindset where you start thinking about the PR angle on things, but that only comes, I think, once you start reading. I mean, what a great brief, right? To improve your PR through reading more magazines. You're like, this is a business expense. Just buy a big pile and sit and drink coffee and read through them. But yeah, that's how you kind of develop that instinct in a way, right? Because then you'll see that magazine X likes to do color themed spreads, or magazine Y is really talking a lot about or newspapers, talking about shopping independence. So, and then also you can start identifying who's writing about those topics as well. So there's lots that you can do to make you feel more comfortable with it, I think. And obviously things like joining PR Dispatch and getting that sort of expert input as well. But do you still get that buzz when you see your product in the press?
Yeah, definitely. I've basically saved every single feature I've been in, small or big. But yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it still feels very surreal. It's been 2 years, but I still can't believe it. Sometimes especially when your friends are reading the same magazine and actually your product's in there. It's just really crazy. But, that's the other thing is, once you get the feature, make sure you do the most to kind of, get the most out of it, basically. So be careful about putting it on your website, because there is copyright issues there. But, you can sort of do a piece where you just show your product picture and say that you've been featured in this place.
Yeah.
Just be careful about, quoting them as well. Just be mindful of all those type of things, because there is legal issues around that. But yeah, you can sort of say something there and put it on your social media. That's really important. Obviously put it on your homepage, as you would have seen, as seen in, and then the logo, that's really important. All that just builds social proof, which is really important. So yeah, definitely kind of get it out there as much as possible to let people know that you've been featured there.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much insight with us, and just really impressive to how you've just got it so organized, and also just the results that you've had as well. And it's so interesting. When I did the survey, when I did the product business survey, the free PR, so organic PR that you have, as opposed to paying for it, because that's a whole other topic. But what you're talking about is you're getting free coverage as opposed to, say, paying to be featured in a tiny little ad in the back of some big magazine. This kind of free coverage was the number one thing that people talked about in terms of moving their business forward. So really fascinating to hear more about your process, and thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about where people can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, the Design Palette. The design is missing the E. And then the website is www.thedesignpalette.co.uk.
Well, that was a brilliant episode, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me that Komal was incredibly generous within sharing her processes for how she gets her products into the press. Why not come over and see me on Instagram at Resilient Retail Club? How about you share a screenshot of where you are when you're listening? I always love to see that. It's always so inspiring. As well as let me know, what are you going to do? Have you been inspired to start pitching? Do you already pitch to the press? Have you got any other thoughts about what works really well for you? Also, if you have a moment to rate and review the podcast, it will be so appreciated. I promise I read every single review, and it really means a lot to me. And of course, if you subscribe, then you will be the first to know about new episodes. And once again, thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in over the last year. I cannot believe that this podcast is 1 year old today, but thank you so much for being here. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions, or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.